Good morning, everyone. I guess today is going to be myself and my colleague Chris are going to take you through, I guess I'm going to talk about some data and what it means, and then he's going to tell you how you can get your hands on it and what you can do with it, I guess in short. Now, for anyone that's never seen me present before, I never do the same presentation twice. I find that boring. I don't like to do canned presentations. So we sort of try to figure out pieces of data that are new. There are things that are the latest, greatest, because everyone knows really what's going on sort of up until now. So what's sort of the latest thing that's popped on our across our desks? And I have a little bit of that for you today. And then as a segue into Chris's bit about the MLS Home Price Index, I'm going to show you how I like to look at it in the context of my own house and how I conceptualize it. So that said, let me share my screen. Everyone good? We can see? Yes? Okay, good. All right. So I'm going to start off today with some data that just came out last Thursday, and that's sort of my latest, greatest thing. It's migration and immigration data from StatCan. And I think super important. Up until recently, it hasn't really been showing us all of the things that we've been hearing about and wondering about. I've been asked the question a million times, we got these buyers from Toronto and Halifax. Does the data show that? And it hasn't been until 2 business days ago, and now it is. So that's the migration piece that I'll talk about. And then there's also the immigration piece, which has been massively important, not paid attention to enough in the last 5 years in terms of how we got to where we are. And that there's some news on that front too. But I'll start just with this. It's kind of a messy chart, but I'll show you what you need to see. Net interprovincial migration in Canada. So by province, who's losing, who's gaining. This starts in Q1 of 2019, because I wanted to capture before COVID, right up until Q1 of 2021. And the first thing I would point out is, look at BC and look at Ontario. BC is gaining big time and Ontario is losing big time. Now, of course, like for Ontario, that's not that huge of a loss because it's a huge province. And when you put it all in one chart, like it sort of squishes the Maritimes. And so you have to be a little bit careful there. But this is definitely a big change in the trends that had been happening up until the end of last year. But check this out, the red arrow here, Alberta, another big loser, all to BC. Quebec, record gain interprovincially. New Brunswick, record gain. Nova Scotia, record gain. And even over here on the right-hand side, Newfoundland and Labrador gained a few people from interprovincial migration for the first time. And I don't know how long. This is almost unprecedented. So these are major changes in interprovincial migration that are only just showing up in the data right now. But if I'm a realtor, I look at this as COVID is making a lot of people move around. And so in terms of what we're seeing in the resale numbers, we're not measuring sales and listings, even though oftentimes we conceptualize it that way. What the big thing we're measuring here is people moving around, and COVID's causing a lot of that. And I'm sure that you're all experiencing that. I don't think that this Ontario story is as negative as maybe you think. I don't think that the federal government's going to have too much trouble convincing new immigrants to Canada to go to the GTA. Really, they just have to stop trying to convince them to go to the Maritimes if we're going to have a shift in that. Now, this chart here is net international immigration to Canada. And everyone's been sort of wondering and waiting, when is this thing going to ramp back up? It certainly looks like it is. The first thing I'd point out is where my arrow is here, 2016, 17, 18, 19. If you're wondering why supply is getting drained so much out of the housing supply, it's this. And all the millennials turning from their 20s to their 30s all at the same time. You got a lot of first-time home buyers. And so the big question was, first of all, acknowledge that this was a major factor in housing markets leading into COVID, and also recognize that, it's going to come back, right? And it's going to be just as big of a deal. And so where are we now? Even though this bar at the end here doesn't look like that big of a deal, I deal with housing data. I know what seasonal data looks like. most international immigration to Canada comes in the warmer months, and this is Q1. So you really have to look at it against all the other Q1s in history. And to me, this is looking like it's pretty back to normal at this point. So the big question is later this year. And the weird thing about StatCan data is it doesn't come out as in such a timely way as our data does. And so this is all happening right now, and we're not going to get the data for another 3 months. But you know, if this was following the seasonal trend of, say, like 2 years ago, we could have some major immigration numbers coming back online, you know, really right now, and in the months to come. So from that data, that's sort of the latest, greatest thing to come across my desk last week. I'd say international immigration and population growth are coming back, and they're probably going to come back in a big way. Everyone expected them to. I think the risk is that they come back even stronger, and people are moving around more. And so housing demand and people buying and selling. I don't think that some of the trends we've seen during COVID, I think part of the theme of what I'm going to get to in a minute is maybe there's a little bit less frenzy around it, but I don't think that that level of activity is going away anytime soon. And I guess that's, I would suspect, good news for all of you. And, you know, it's just, these are, see, when people talk about fundamentals, they like to talk about interest rates and that sort of thing, but it's like people, like more people needing a roof over their head and wanting to move around is what the main factor that we look at when we're trying to forecast the resale housing market. Now, of course, the problem is, as you all know, this is every listing on every MLS system in Canada at the end of every month over the last quarter century. And we are currently at a record low. Record high housing stock, record high population, set to resume major growth as well. And the lowest number of sales or homes for sale for these people that we've ever had. And so I know that it feels like, and you can tell me after this, it definitely feels like there's a psychological change in the market since about March to now, like around the Easter weekend. It's like, it's almost like it went away and it never came back with the same sort of frenzy. I guess we were all getting vaccinated and like, we're like, okay, you know, you don't have to get a bunker now to ride this thing out because it's basically ending. But the fundamental problem of way too much demand and not enough supply is still with us. This is the number of months of inventory for Canada. So the active listings I just showed you divided by still very strong sales. And you can see where we are. We're still in just completely unprecedented territory, down stuck at 2 months of inventory nationally. You know, price gains may be slowing, but this idea that we're suddenly going to be back in some Goldilocks, not too hot, not too cold situation when these cycles are very long. I'm not sure what to say other than to put it on the screen and say, you know, you tell me. But it seems to me that we're still stuck in the exact same spot we were in. If anything, the only thing slowing price gains down is the fact that they've gone up so much, you know, that they can only go so high. But at the same time, it hasn't rebalanced the way that, you know, economics 101 might expect it to, because where are people going to live? You can't just sell all your housing away and because there's so much demand, you got to move somewhere. And so it's a bit of a pickle, and you know, and it's going to be an election issue for sure, and that's coming. And we have heard from government, and they're looking for ideas. But unfortunately, like building 500,000 new homes so that everyone can have one is not something that can happen overnight. And they're looking to pull levers that they can pull right now. They don't want to choke off millennial demand and hurt millennials anymore, because that's a big voting group and they're pissed off about housing. But they also don't want to stimulate the market. So I'm not sure what they're going to do. You know, the NDP is saying we're just going to build a ton of homes. That actually is the solution. But when you actually get into the weeds of the details of how you make that happen, that's where it gets tricky. Otherwise, someone would have done it by now in some country somewhere, and yet we're all dealing with the same issue. Now, of course, when you've got record tight market conditions like we have, prices rise, and they rise rapidly. We've all known that things have gone up very rapidly over the last year. I mean, that's $150,000 on the MLS Home Price Index benchmark price for Canada in less than a year. It does look like things are slowing down a bit, but again, you know, I've compared it before to the rocket car on the Bonneville Salt Flats. You know, it's like in March we were doing 600 miles an hour, and now we're doing 400. It's like, yes, that's a slowdown, but boy, you know, there's a long way to go to get back to where people are going to be comfortable and things are calm, cool, and collected. Now, this is, I know that you're in Toronto, so I threw in a GTA chart here. This is the number of months of inventory in the GTA. Same problem, you know, you're stuck at 1 month of inventory. You know, remember 2016, 17, same sort of situation, except prices are much higher, which is the only thing sort of pushing the brakes right now compared to back then. And of course, prices in Toronto rising quite rapidly as well. They'd be rising even faster if it weren't for the fact that Toronto has a much larger stock of condos than all these other places you're comparing it to elsewhere in Ontario. But what's happening now is it's that detached story of the last year is slowing down and the condos are taking off. And so, and one of the interesting things was the big jump in Toronto sales back at the early part of this year was because people all of a sudden, and you can tell me if this has been your experience, but people all of a sudden decided they wanted to buy condos again. And what was available for sale in January was condos. And then of course, cottage country and that sort of thing, nothing was happening. And all those listings came out in March, and then that went crazy. And then now everything's sort of slowed down, but it's like the condo market seems to be being able to churn along a little bit better. And we're seeing less slowdown on the price side, but at the same time, they haven't risen as much. So maybe a bit of a flip-flop there. Something that a lot of people have predicted, you know, are we going to see a reversal of these, someone called it COVID crazy trends? You know, like these people that are just like, I'm leaving town forever, and I'm just going to presume I never have to go back to the office. I wonder to what extent people are making those decisions, but I wonder also to what extent most of those decisions are not going to be made until 2022 and 23 and 24, and people can make longer term plans once we're sort of out the other side of this thing. And you can see that clearly prices are slowing down on a month-to-month basis. But if you look at the supply issue, you look at the number of months of inventory out there, this thing is not going to just flatten out or go down anytime soon. And it's really hard to, even doing forecasting, to try to like lean on it enough that it's not just continuing to go into the stratosphere forever. And when we look at what's, you know, coming on the horizon from the standpoint of demand, I mean, you know, all of that immigration and population growth is coming back. All of those frustrated millennials, it's not like they all bought homes in the last year. They're all frustrated because they didn't get homes. So I can't imagine that demand is going away either. So it's, like I said, it's a pickle. It'd be better if we had homes for everyone, but you know, the yellow belt issue is a real issue. And you got that story in the Globe and Mail about that company that wants to buy up a bunch of single family homes and just, I guess, shove one extra household in the basement instead of redeveloping it. Not exactly the housing of the future. And that's why people are so mad about it. But, you know, if only this whole sort of zoning and red tape and all of the other issues around redevelopment were addressed, you can't really be mad at companies buying single family homes. That's going to happen. And so, but it's about redevelopment of land, not single family homes. So yeah, watch the space. I mean, I'm not an expert in that sort of thing. I'm just sort of a casual observer. So in general, the narrative right now is sales are slowing compared to March. So April, May, they went down. Listings went down too. Record COVID cases. We had lockdowns before where the market sort of went away for a while and then came back. But we're also all getting vaccinated. So the urgency of reacting during the pandemic to sort of get a home base to ride this thing out, I think that's fading away. Downtowns are opening back up. Like we were saying before this meeting, I was on a patio. That was an experience. Price growth slowing, but still very strong. Market conditions calming down, but still very tight. So you go from 1.7 months of inventory to 2.1 in the last couple of months. Yeah, that's an easing off of conditions, but an average number of months of inventory is 5.5. So you're still like, you're just you're just so far away from it that it's like years unless something changes drastically. And supply is obviously still a major issue. It hasn't even turned the corner yet. So, you know, there's nothing for sale in the resale market compared to history. And they're saying we should build, but they're not really building that. I mean, like, you know, there's a few monthly records, and then they say we're building units, and it's not the units that people want. And so, you know, the story continues, I guess, is what I would say. Now, before my colleague Chris talks about the HPI, I want to talk about it from an analytical standpoint, the way I look at it. So I'm switching gears here. I'm going to get super granular, and I'm actually going to go from Canada to Ontario to Toronto to actually my own house in Ottawa and look at how I conceptualize the usefulness of the HPI from the standpoint of a neighborhood and particular property types and how you can use it in that respect. Now, this is a series that my colleague Chris generated for me last week. It's the average price of a two-story detached home in my neighborhood. My neighborhood's called Bel Air Park. I've often said if I were to run out the door right now with my running shoes on, I could run around the entire neighborhood and be back in a minute. So it's very granular. 1957, 58, 59 homes. But as you can see, the problem with generating stats from very granular areas like neighborhoods is there's not a lot of data. And so there's more missing months here than there are complete ones. And even where there are bars here, we're talking about the average price of one home or two. And so one of the cool things about the HPI is that they use a 3-year moving sample and they model it and then feed it into a benchmark home. So it solves the problem of scarce or scant data by filling in all of those blanks. And it also solves the problem of compositional, different houses selling all the time, and feeds it into a benchmark property type so that you get a line like that. And that's actually the HPI benchmark price in my neighborhood. And so you can see that that's a lot more rich data source than what you get from averages or medians or just individual sales. This is where this data science comes in to like create basically the line that we all want to be there, that we all want to be able to use. And so that's my neighborhood, but that's for the benchmark property type. When I bought my place, it was actually pretty extensively renovated. We had a 2-month-old, we had a 2-year-old. You know, there wasn't going to be a lot of renovation going on, so we decided to buy a place that was mostly done. And so what the neat thing about having an inflation factor for a neighborhood and property type like this is you can re-index it to a previously known market price. So that's my house. It's actually, you can see that it sits right atop this stick here because the average price in my neighborhood in February of 2012 was my house. So you can see that there's a difference there because obviously it was, you know, new roof, new windows, new doors, new garage. So what you can do is you can re-index this line to the previously known market price, which takes into account the difference between the benchmark and the actual property that you're talking about. And provided, now, you know, if somebody put a second story on a bungalow, or if they put a rental in next door and it's a bunch of students smoking on the front lawn with a washing machine, a computer can't take that into account. So there's only so much that this can do, but it is a really neat little party trick to be able to re-index to a previous sale price and basically get the price story both backwards and forwards of a property that leads you right up until today, which gives you, I don't like the word estimate, certainly it's an inflation adjusted previous sale price based on the best measure of inflation we have for that exact thing that we're talking about. And I can tell you, like, you know, if I were to sell right now, I'd hope I get sort of in that range. I think it's like, you could sort of have a range, but really pretty close. And that's sort of a neat little party trick. And I think that one of the things that Chris is going to show you, if I can stop my share here, because I'm done now, is the HPI tool. This is strange. Am I stopping sharing now?
Yep.
I am, okay. The HPI tool that Chris is going to show you has a module within it that does that exact cross multiplication. So you tell it, here's what this property sold for, here's when it sold, and here's the neighborhood it's in, and it will give you that estimate of what it's worth today, which is kind of a neat little thing. I was just wanting to show graphically what it's doing in the background. And with that, I'm going to shut my mouth and maybe pass it over to my colleague, Chris, to maybe we can do, if there's any questions, we can save them to the end. Does that make sense? So Chris, you want to take it away?
Sure, thanks very much, Shaun. So my name is Chris Jokel. I'm an economist at the Canadian Real Estate Association, and I'm the lead contact on the Home Price Index file. Now, I'm just going to switch over here, share the screen, and I'm actually going to stop this video so you can see a better resolution here. Now, this is the HPI tool that is available exclusively to members of TREB. And where you find this, I believe, is behind the Clarity login. It looks like this, and there should be an app or a link somewhere behind that. Unfortunately, I obviously can't access it because I'm not a member of TREB, but behind here, there should be a member portal, and then you should be able to access the HPI Dashboard tool, which looks like this. Now, I'm just going to briefly walk you through most of the features of this tool. There's a ton of information available out there in the form of help guides, and I'll also show you where to find that. So the way that you navigate the dashboard tool is through these tabs here just at the top. And so because there's so much information that you can extract from the HPI, the reason that we initially developed this tool for members is because when the HPI first launched, it was really up to members to sort of extract data themselves. Like they'd have to download these massive spreadsheets of data, if the board provided it to them. And we decided instead to provide a tool that could help members actually visualize and analyze the HPI data. And so the way that it would work is like this. In this first dropdown, if you want to filter on your areas, you have basically all the major areas and municipalities in the GTA covered by the HPI. But if you already know the neighborhood you're looking for, you can just type it into this dropdown here. And for the purposes of this demonstration, I'm going to look at two-story detached single-family homes in Leaside. The way that the property types work here in the HPI, composite just means it's a roll-up of everything. So composite is basically your overall residential category. And that breaks down into single-family homes, townhomes, and apartments. And single-family, you can break that down even further because actually what's really cool with TREB's HPI is that they've paid for these additional breakouts for attached and detached. So for the overall single family category, you have attached and detached, but even more granular than that, you have the 1-story and the 2-story homes, which themselves break out into attached and detached. So I'm going to go with 2-story detached single family homes. And I'm actually going to compare Leaside with Mount Pleasant. I believe those are relatively close to each other. And so in the first tab, all you end up seeing is a very simple line chart that just shows you how home price trends have evolved over time in these 3 neighborhoods. And you can hover over the different data points to see what's going on in time. Another really cool thing about Toronto's data is that most boards only have data going back to 2005, but Toronto actually has data going all the way back to January of 2000. Now, if you look at the the axis here on the left, you'll notice that we're looking at indexed values. And that's the HPI, which is super useful for looking at home price trends because you can compare, 1-story homes to condos, to townhouses, and you can put that all on a comparable basis because it's all indexed back to January of 2005. But we know that a lot of realtors might not like looking at trends. They want to look at price levels. So up here at the top, there's a little toggle where you can switch between HPI and benchmark price. And now instead of looking at price trends, you can actually look at how price levels have evolved over time. And there's a little date slider here up at the top. If you want to zoom in on a specific segment of time, instead of looking at data all the way back to 2000, you can do that as well. And that's really all there is to this first tab. It's just a simple line chart that can help you plot price trends and price levels over time. However, there are a ton of other ways to sort of slice and dice the data, and we've presented a couple of them in this dashboard. Another one, very simple, we're still looking at the same 3 neighborhoods for 2-story detached single-family homes, so your selections have all carried over. But now we're just looking at a point calculation. how have prices changed relative to 1 month ago? So you have the most current data available, which was May 2021, and you're just comparing how prices have changed relative to April. And you can also choose from a pre-selected point in time. For instance, if you want to stack up against a year ago, well, it's actually two-story detached single-family homes in Leaside that are up the most relative to the other two neighborhoods. And that's it. That's it for that tab as well. We also present the data in a tabular format, perhaps for people who are more data-minded, or if you want to incorporate this table in a report for yourself or for your client. Very simple, very intuitive. Again, same three neighborhoods, two-story detached homes, and we're just looking at how the benchmark prices of the most recent data available stack up against where they were at selected points in time. And again, if you don't want to just look at the raw data, there's a toggle here at the top where you can switch to percentage changes. And the way that you interpret these percentage changes, so for instance, this 24.7% just means that this benchmark price for two-story detached homes in Mount Pleasant West is up almost 25% compared to where it was 3 years ago. And again, it's very simple. Just a couple of clicks can get you the information that you need. And what's really cool actually are the next three features of the HPI tool, which were added, I think, only in recent years. And it was actually in response to member feedback that we were having on the tool. So this first one here, price estimate, actually relates to what Shaun was talking about. Because one common question, and actually it was a complaint that we were getting from members was, okay, so it's great that you have, these HPI trends over time, but, let's say I have a listing that's sold all the way back in, I don't know, sometime in 2002. Now I know what the price was of my listing that sold back then. So what I have to do is calculate the percentage change between, the difference between what the benchmark price was and what my listing sold for. And then I have to reapply that percentage change to what it would be now. And it's basically a whole bunch of manual math that you have to do. And if you're doing several CMAs a week, that's just a big sort of waste of time of this back of the napkin math that really you shouldn't have to worry about. And so the way that this feature works here is essentially a very simple calculator. In this dropdown, you have every single neighborhood and detailed property type combination in the GTA, essentially supported by TREB's HPI. Now, I'm just going to start typing in Leaside because that's what we were doing for the example. So for instance, in Leaside, let's say I have a listing and it last sold in, I don't know, let's go with March 2002. And I know that the listing sold for, I'm just going to take a stab in the dark. Let's say it sold for $450. So based on these specific HPI models for the property type and the neighborhood that you've selected, and the previous selling price of the listing that you can actually manually input yourself and the date that it's sold on, the estimated price of that home based on the HPI models as of the most recent data available would be that figure right there. And so that takes a lot of the work out of you having to try and calculate all these inflation factors. And the point that we always hammer home on multiple times in all of our webinars is that this is not at all intended to replace the work of your CMA. It is going to be a very accurate and reliable baseline that you can, build your CMA on, but it cannot replace, the expertise of the realtor in their local market. Now, the second last feature over here, again, in response to member feedback was, okay, you talk about benchmark prices and benchmark homes being a sort of typical middle of the road home in my neighborhood, but if I'm looking at a benchmark price of, 1.5 mil in my neighborhood, what exactly does a benchmark home even look like? Like, is this just a virtual random home coming out of a black box and I just have to sort of guess at what a middle of the road home looks like in my neighborhood? And again, that's an excellent question, because if you don't really understand what a benchmark home is, you won't understand how maybe to make the necessary price adjustments to your listing. So again, we'll stick with Leaside, and I'll just compare 1- and 2-story detached single-family homes for this example. And I'm going to show you all the attributes available for a benchmark home. And what you're essentially looking at here is a very simple lookup table. So for 1-story detached and 2-story detached single family homes in the neighborhood of Leaside, this is what a benchmark or typical middle of the road home looks like in each of these neighborhoods. And this is the representation that the HPI models are using to build the benchmark price. So for instance, if I have a benchmark price of the most recent data of about 1.9 mil, this price represents a home that looks like this. It's got 2 bedrooms. It's got, this much living area above ground. This is the lot size, the fireplaces, so on and so forth. And then in that way, at least you have more information to help you make an educated decision on how you're building your list price or any adjustments that you might have to make. Another really useful feature of this lookup table is some members have come to us in the past and said, well, a really common question we get from our clients is, what am I going to get for a typical, 1-story or 2-story home in this neighborhood or that neighborhood or some of the neighborhoods around this area? And this actually allows them, using actual MLS data, to sort of build a virtual representation and say, well, for a typical middle of the road home in this neighborhood, this is basically what you're looking at as of the most recent data available. And finally, the last feature here, perhaps one of the most important, was, another question we get is, okay, it's great that you have these, 6 or 7 benchmark categories in the HPI, but there are literally, if not hundreds, different combinations of, classes and type and styles that we can have because, every property is unique. So how do I know which benchmark category my listing falls into? And that's a really important question and information to know, because if you're not looking at the correct corresponding benchmark category that aligns with your listing, you're not going to be getting the most accurate and relevant home price trends and information. And again, just like with the other features on this dashboard, it's very easy to use. You're basically just selecting information that would come right off the listing form. So let's say, my listing that I'm looking at is, let's keep it simple. It's a residential backsplit 5 detached home. The category that I'm going to want to look at in the HPI is a 2-story detached single family home. And that's it. It's basically just another simple lookup table. And in case you were wondering, yes, there is a way that you can export all of your saved selections from the entire dashboard, just so you don't have to worry about doing screen grabs and things like that. There's a button here at the bottom. It says download, and you can export either individual tabs here as images, or you can actually export the entire dashboard into a PDF or a PowerPoint, maybe to put in a report for yourselves or for your clients. And there is a link to our help guide here down at the bottom right corner, and that'll walk you through in a lot of detail, basically all the other cool, neat tips and tricks that you can do with the dashboard that I necessarily didn't cover off here. Like if you want to fix labels on certain points, you hold down the control button and that'll do that if you want to export it. But yeah, the help guide here has walkthrough videos, and it'll walk you through all the other details of the HPI tool. And if you are looking on where to find all those additional resources, on the landing page of realtorlink.ca, there's a huge MLS Home Price Index banner here, and that will take you to our MLS HPI Learning Hub, where you have the help guide for the tool, but you also have a recorded webinar that goes into a lot of detail on what the HPI itself is, and a small course that you can take on the tool, as well as other training resources. So we don't really throw you in the water and leave you to drown on this, because it really is a detailed tool, and there really is a ton of useful information that you can extract from it. Now, just before I hand it back to Shaun, I'm going to just briefly touch on the CREA Stats Centre. He was talking about how you can extract, data for housing markets across Canada. Now, the way that you can access it, the easiest way, I suppose, from RealtorLink under Statistics and Research, there's just a link to the CREA Stats Centre, and that will take you to, the homepage basically of the CREA Stats Centre, where you just log in using your NAF ID. And the 3 main types of data that we offer on the Stats Centre are the national news release, and that's just a PDF copy of the news release we put out every month, and it also includes our detailed data tables. We have our CREA unit statistics. Those are available only for select boards. You'd be able to get more detailed information like sales, median price, days on market, drilled down by area. And our most common one here is the CREA Aggregate statistics. And this is the most commonly requested data that we have from the media, from financial institutions, stakeholders, both nationally and internationally. And you have all the data broken down by Canada, the provinces, the boards. You can choose if you want to break the data out annually or in other time frames. We have all our major series here available. And again, this site is available exclusively to members. So no one from the public has access to the site. And a couple other things, residential and total data. Normally we stick with residential. And of course, one of the most important features is you can differentiate between actual and seasonally adjusted, because if you're looking at month-over-month changes and you really want to identify turning points in the market, seasonally adjusted data is what you want to look at. And then you just sort of follow the steps here and it'll take you through the checkout, and then you can just download all the data you want as often as you want. You can even save reports, and it's all free of charge because it's available exclusively to members. So I know I've covered basically a ton of information in a very short amount of time. But as always, if you ever have any questions, don't hesitate to contact either your board or your brokerage or even us. It's no problem. We like taking questions from members, and we just want to make sure that you're basically getting the most out of all the data that we have to offer. So with that, I can turn it over either back to Shaun, Rebecca, or Larry, and we can open up for Q&A. We'll certainly be around as long as you need us.
Yeah, you know what? First of all, thank you, gentlemen. As I said before, I've been spoiled because I get to see this stuff a lot when I'm at the board table as a director, and I've always wanted to share whatever we can with our office as much as we can get. We want to try to give you guys first hands of basically a personal touch where you can talk to these gentlemen that are behind the scene. And just for the record, these people are sought after from coast to coast, these two, along with others. So in fact, tomorrow you'll be seeing Shaun again with Benjamin and that with Impact. You'll see that. But it's not, other than to say thank you so much. And I think at this time, if we have some questions, maybe Rebecca, I'll let you watch the queue. I don't have a very good view here, but maybe we can take a few questions if they're willing to. If anybody has any comments or questions they have, please.
We needed some of those pre-scripted ones.
There you go. Actually, we see a couple of comments, maybe in the chat. I see from Giselle, can we get an email address for Chris? Yeah.
Sure, that's no problem. I can send that on to you, Larry and Rebecca, and you guys can maybe pass it out to everyone.
Sure. I don't know if everybody caught that this is going to be recorded, and some of the information as far as the home pricing index, the tools are always fascinating to me because every time we see this, there's something new. Like we go, wow, I didn't know it could do that. We were quite impressed when actually Shaun showed us, well, I bought my home there. Here's what it's worth today. And what a great reinforcement if anybody's trying to take on a listing or being challenged by somebody going, look, this is statistically what it means. Yes, give or take, but this is it. What I love about these guys is that they bring also a national component to say, hey, this is across the country, people. Especially when you're making their comments about the immigration and what's going on locally and so on and so forth. Interesting news about Vancouver and how Ontario and so on is looking. I'll give you an example. I can share with you a personal experience last week. In fact, I shared it with Rebecca. I was doing a FinTrack request from somebody from Saskatoon who had a buyer here that was coming, they never met. And the guy from Saskatoon came to the office. I go, my God, how did you end up in Saskatoon? He goes, we've never been there. I go, oh, but we're buying because we can't afford anything in Ontario, blah, blah, blah. And I went, wow. I says, okay. And these are people that are young, that are making, Rebecca was here when I said, look at that. They're going to gamble and go to another province just so that they can have a roof over their head, like you said earlier, Shaun. Is there anybody else, or Rebecca, do you see anything there anymore coming into you at
No more
all?
questions in the chat. This was so insightful. Great insights to pass along to everyone's clients, especially the HPI. That's such a fantastic tool. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to email Chris. You can also reach out to our brokerage as well. We'll be able to point you in the right direction.
Maybe at that point, if we don't have anything else, I know you guys are jammed. I just want to say on behalf of Remax Ultimate, guys, thank you so much. You guys have been awesome, and I hope, I know I'm going to be putting you on right, everybody's watching you, but if we can get you guys back here, like, you know, in future, because I know we'd like to probably bring you back and bring you up to speed with whatever we can, if that's possible. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
That's what we do. We've just got to give us a few months to get some new trends to talk about. Because I think I have a feeling that, like, you know, I feel like everyone's going to be more focused on getting their lives a little bit back to normal this summer than on housing and everything else. But per my presentation, I don't think that a lot of these issues we've been discussing are going away.
Yeah.
So it'll watch the space, I guess.
Yeah, we really appreciate that. In fact, even before we started, we heard Chris is going to get his first shot. So there you go. He's getting his first shot. We got people who have had their second shots. And I think you're 100% on the money, because people are more focused about, oh my God, I can go eat at a restaurant outside. Wow. and learn how to talk to somebody again. That's interesting too. You know what? I'm going to leave it at that. I'm going to leave it at that. Maybe I'll let Rebecca close it out for us. And again, Chris and Shaun, thank you so much. Great presentation, by the way. Awesome.
Anytime.
Thanks very much for having us.
Have a great day.